Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and I'm happy. Spring is here. Things are growing. Our plum trees, I see some blossoms. They aren't open. But they're getting ready. I checked our lilacs, which are relatively young, 3-4 years. This is the year that they could put out some blossoms. I see some tight little blossoms. The grass is growing. I mowed yesterday before, in between rains. I love the rain. It's delaying some of my own planting and dividing of things. But boy, some of these hot, dry summers and my lawn crunchy brown, I don't want to complain about rain.
No.
And so, man, I'd love to see everything developing. How about your yard? Have you mowed your lawn yet?
Haven't mowed yet, and probably don't need to. We'll see after this rain that we're currently getting now, maybe. So maybe this weekend I will. But no, so far haven't needed to. But the thing you're seeing is just like the trees, how much the trees have advanced in budding out and actually starting to even offer some. They're not full leafed yet, but you can see that they're starting to offer some shade. You can see if there are branches that have died, you can see those.
And I'm so encouraged because we didn't know how this mild winter, too mild isn't good for trees and shrubs either, but, and lack of snow, lack of insulating snow. So I'm very encouraged at what I see coming up, and our perennials seem like they're coming up fine. So far, the trees I see leafing out normally.
Boy, and isn't it something to see how fast some of these things, rhubarb is already taking shape, and bleeding hearts are coming up great. Our peonies are really the stalks on peonies are coming up great.
Encouragement, when you see things, after a long winter. I mean, it was a nice winter, but it is so fun to see things coming, and I'm oftentimes asked, have you planted some of the things in your garden yet? And I don't yet. I got enough other things kind of to work with and plant. So I don't rush to plant our vegetable garden because I always remember what my mom said. As a young housewife, she planted a garden nice and early because it was a warm spring. Everything came up. And then, of course, in May, it all froze off. And so I never forget what Mom told us all those years. So I learned that as I garden with my mom. And it's going to be fun. Today, we're going to kind of focus on gardening things that our moms and grandmas taught us. So it's awesome how each generation can pass on bits of gardening wisdom. A lot of the things are things you probably don't read in a book, because it's those kind of tried and true. You can tell if somebody passes on something to you that they've actually tried and that works for them. And that's some of the wisdom from our moms and grandmas.
Isn't that something too, that that taking that generational knowledge? Well, if you were raised in a family where the family you were all about automotives and cars, look, fixing your car has changed so much in, the tools. Some of the tools maybe aren't even useful that you were passed down from your grandpa or grandma. Things like that. But gardening is, because it's I don't want to say it's a simple thing. It's not, but there's a kind of a rudimentary, elementary,
There's something very earthy about gardening.
Yeah, it's something kind of basic. And once you figure it out, there's no big scientific advancements in home gardening, or not many.
Yeah, the seeds you planted thousands of years ago, you still plant seeds and get them to grow. Exactly.
There could be some things like better fertilizer or better pots or something like that.
And maybe you kind of fine tune the way things are done, some recommendations that come along. Oh, but wave petunias, the cave people didn't have wave petunias. So we have an advancement there.
We have more options on things.
Options. That's a good way to put
it. But tell us a little bit about your mom and growing up with. You talked about that your mom and your grandma too, I believe you said, both really fantastic gardeners.
My mom was the gardener in the family. In some families it's the dad. Okay, my grandfather Kinsler was the gardening in that family. In fact, he actually died in his garden. I kind of smile when I say it because, man, what a way to go. And so he actually dropped over in his garden, which, it was sad, but man, yeah.
go, it was probably somewhat, going where he liked to be. Yeah,
I think
exactly.
He was happy. He was out in his garden. And so anyway, my grandfather Kinsler was the gardener in that family. My mom was the gardener in our family. Mom loved to plant. My dad mowed the lawn, and he loved to rototill. So dad would rototill, mom would plant, marriage made in heaven.
Right.
So, in many cases, my wife Mary and I both garden. So sometimes it's one or the other. So it's kind of fun now to focus on our moms and grandmas because it's Mother's Day approaching. And so, I learned so many things. I started gardening about age 5 with my mom. And I think she took me out in the garden to keep an eye on me, I'm sure, at age 5. But it's kind of like I've never left. I kind of saw things growing, things coming up, and it just caught a spark. I caught that flame and that infection, and it stayed with me. So some of the basic things I learned from her, not to plant too early because we'll get a frost more likely than not in May. Other simple things like sweet peas, the flowering sweet peas, the vining type that have that awesome fragrance. She always planted them along the garden fence. And although she wouldn't plant the vegetables too early, she said sweet pea flowers love cold soil, cool soil. So she would soak the seed overnight because they're a hard seed. So she would soak them overnight, plant them in April, because it's cold. They would come up beautifully. You see, in the heat of the summer, then they don't like it so well. Okay, so I learned how to plant sweet peas from her. Another good example is when I helped her plant tomato plants, in May, maybe 20th of May, 25th of May. I knew later in the summer, at a certain point, we always put straw around the tomatoes. We mulched the tomatoes. Mm-hmm. And so I suggested to Mom, okay, right after we plant the tomato in May, let's put the straw around. It'd be so much easier to get it around them when the plants are still small. And Mom said, no, you have to wait until the soil warms up first. If you put the straw in too soon, the soil's still cold, and that straw is going to keep it cold. It's the air temperature or the sunlight isn't going to penetrate, and tomatoes like warm soil. So she says, no, we wait until the end of June. And years later, I found that's the recommendation. It's interesting. I love my horticulture training, but experience is also wonderful training. And she had that experience, and it meshed with the recommendations. And so those are a couple of things that she just absolutely passed on. Oh, another simple thing, when you're transplanting out petunias into a flower bed, pinch off any flowers that are on there. I think we talked about that when we talked about how to plant things. Pinch off those first early flowers because more strength will go into the plant. And I remember watching Mom, I thought, my gosh, you're getting rid of all the pretty stuff there. But she knew that strength would go into the plant, and that always stuck with me. I've done it ever since because it works. And so, wonderful. And so many things that we learn from them. How about you? Did you come from a gardening family? Some people do. Some just kind of catch it on their own.
My mom says, and I didn't really remember her dad that much, but that he had, my grandpa Elroy had a garden, and he had his irises, which he is very proud of. Oh, sure. And so my Aunt Mary took some of his irises, and she's been able to kind of keep them going and then split them up. So whenever
those heritage type plants, that is awesome to say that you've got something from an aunt, great grandmother, great granddad. Awesome.
So my Aunt Mary, she's kept them up, and then every time someone, one of the nieces or nephews buys a house, she ships them that too, that they get to have their own starter of Grandpa Elroy's irises. And my mom did like to go out into the garden. She had a little space. Didn't really do a whole lot, but I think that's because she was busy, raising the kids.
Oh, yeah, raising a family.
She loves and still loves garden fresh vegetables. So she was very big on getting the fresh fruit and fresh vegetables. She would take that from neighbors or, when that was offered or get stuff from the markets. But as she got older, she would do more like flowers. So she's very big on geraniums, and she's the one that I learned from how to keep an amaryllis over a year.
And get it to rebloom again.
Year. She's kept a poinsettia And she's got a geranium that she's kept for years. So she has, I think as she's gotten a little bit more time on her hands after the kids left the house, she could focus a little bit on gardening. You bring up a good
point too. When younger moms and dads are busy raising kids, they don't always have time for gardening, and so sometimes it is your grandmas, grandpas that teach kids how to garden. And yesterday, so that we could get some input into this, I put out on Facebook for people, since we're focusing on Mother's Day, to share some things that their mothers or grandmothers taught them about gardening. So we got some wonderful, wonderful responses. And as you pointed out, John, a number of these said, they refer to their grandma right away.
Yeah.
So maybe grandma was the one that had time when these kids were growing up, that had the time to garden when maybe mom was busy getting meals on the table.
Or working. Or working like a job outside of the house. Definitely.
Exactly.
Well, so let's read through some of these. This will be kind of fun. So we're going to read through some of the you'd put out on Facebook. You'd ask for some kind of memories or recollections that people may have had, and
we said that we'd share their names too, because people might some even mentioned kind of a tribute to their mother or grandma. So we're gonna mention the names as well.
Yeah. So this one is from Diane Scramstad, and she wrote, "Planting potatoes, put eyes to the sky." That's in memory of her mother, Marlene Schlegel.
That's fascinating, because the eyes, of course, are the little depression. When I talk to kids about planting potatoes, I love asking, did you know potatoes have eyes? Those are the little depressions from which the sprouts are going to come. And I often think of this when I plant potatoes, seed potatoes, the chunks of potatoes. When I drop those into the hole, I often think, wow, if I get it upside down, those little sprouts are going to have to work their way down and up and around. So I'm always careful, to plant those eyes up on top so that the sprouts will just come up naturally upward and not have to kind of squirrel their way around.
Yeah.
So eyes to the sky. I like it.
There's a lot of truth there. This is from Susan Schultz. She said, "My grandma Wallman gave us each a small space in her large garden and said, plant what you love. To this day, I only plant what I love." Great advice.
Oh, it is. And that's one of the things when a person reads, for example, one of the vegetable gardening things that NDSU put out, when you're starting your garden, one of the things was, just plan what you want. Plan to plant the things that you like, that your family likes, things that your kids will maybe eat. I'm not a big Brussels sprouts person, but so I never plant Brussels sprouts. But I've tasted some that are done the right way, so I'm going to plant Brussels sprouts.
This is from Ardeen. I think if we were not saying these right, we apologize. Ardeen Myers. "My grandma always started her tomato plants inside by her birthday on March 28th. I still follow the guideline. So much advice about plants, flowers, and gardening I gained and didn't even know it."
Well, Ardene's grandma was totally right. Okay, she remembered to plant them on her birthday, March 28th. The recommendation is about April 1st. So that's just within days. So absolutely, to remember on your birthday, that occurs.
What a good way to celebrate your birthday, right?
Yeah, plant tomatoes, seed tomatoes.
Yeah, if you love gardening, get it, do something where you're planting seeds. You got that. No matter what the weather's like outside in late March, you're going to be thinking of summer and you're going to be looking forward to those tomato plants.
Definitely. And one mistake that people make when they are starting their own tomato plants from seed is to start too early. And then they just get tall, lanky, and whippy and languish away. So the idea of starting them March 28th or April 1st, a couple of days later, that's perfect.
Yeah, we've got another one here from Dorothy Schindler Nelson. She wrote what she learned from her mother was that growing your own food is so satisfying and rewarding, and the beauty of flowers. She had a garden all the way up to her 89th year. Also, she was always said, bloom where you are planted.
And that's great advice. And gardening is good exercise. So, Dorothy's mom gardening until year 89, it's good exercise. There's a lot of bending, stooping, stretching with that. And you pay good money to go to the gym for that, and here we get it free.
Well, and also kind of mental exercise, keeping things organized, having a task to do, even if it's a relatively simple task like putting plants in or putting seeds in, the kind of muscle memory, but just it helps keep you organized and gives you something to do. I think that's being productive in that way is always very rewarding.
Oh, it is. That's awesome. I should mention about Dorothy. Dorothy, I recognized her name a few years ago. She shared Gardeners Share. She shared some divisions of mammoth mums, they're called, out of University of Minnesota. Okay. They're more winter hardy than some of the chrysanthemum varieties. And so Dorothy shared some mums with me.
Very nice.
Yes. So thank you, Dorothy, for that and your comments.
Well, let's take a quick little break. When we come back, more with some listener feedback and things that they remember from their mother, what their mother taught them about gardening.
When you can't make it to City Hall or school board meetings, local journalists from Inforum.com will be there to report the facts and get your questions answered. Local news works for you. Stay up to date at Inforum.com.
All right, we're back and we're talking about things that our mother taught us about gardening for Mother's Day this weekend. And Becky Tesher Robinson wrote, when we planted the seeds outside, my mom would say, one for the blackbird, one for the crow, one for the cutworm, and one to grow.
I love it. Kind of a catchy little poem, too. But also that's kind of true. You have different things that go after your material.
Yeah.
And the same is true for our mulberry bush. It's kind of a tree. But anyway, the birds eat that, but they leave me enough down below. So I'm happy.
That's very thoughtful
like that
of them.
Philosophy.
This is from Beth Hill. My most favorite memories of my grandma are in her garden. She taught me how you can make snapdragons talk.
That's awesome. Have you ever examined the flower of a snapdragon? And the reason they call them a snapdragon, the blossom kind of looks like the head of a dragon. But the flower parts can come apart. And if you kind of squeeze it at the right part, the jaws open up.
Yeah.
The jaws open up. So it's, and I suppose that's why they call it snapdragon, because the little jaws will kind of open and shut, kind of snap open and shut. So yeah, that's a favorite thing to show kids. And so it's awesome that Beth's grandma showed her that. Yeah. And the memories of her in her garden.
Yeah. And, we've never grown snapdragons. So this is all something new to me, but it's not new to everybody. A woman, Lori Somerville, wrote that when her daughter was 2, a snapdragon started, quote unquote, talking to her. And she had a whole conversation, never realizing it was me. So, the whole snapdragon that's
sure.
That's kind
mom
of a
was
fun
probably
thing.
Squeezing just the right part so the little snapdragon was talking to her. Oh, that's awesome.
This is one from Larry Audette. Grandma Nellie would say people often put sugar on their strawberries, but manure makes them grow bigger and sweeter.
That's an old joke. I'll say it real quickly. The new person next door moves in, and there's an experienced old gardener, and the new person says, my rhubarb just isn't growing at all, and asks the experienced gardener. And the experienced gardener says, well, have you tried manure on your rhubarb? And the new gardener says, well, we prefer sugar. And so I've heard that with both strawberries and rhubarb.
Quite true. Angie Gap says, what she learned from her mom was that trying new things and saving seed. We did the NDSU seed trials maybe 40 years ago. I remember doing celery seed trial and growing it every year after that. Mom saved seed and found that her local seed did better.
And those NDSU seed trials still go on. So it's awesome that Angie remembers that. They're still going on in the spring of the year. If you're interested, such as March or so, Google NDSU seed trials. You can participate in those.
Yeah. Speaking of NDSU, an NDSU professor, Ross Collins, he wrote, it says, it's hard to distill one thing, as my mom wrote the garden column for the Forum for 50 years. And that was,
I read her column for 50 years.
That was, of course, Dorothy Collins.
I read her growing up. Every Sunday I would open that paper, and you weren't looking for the garden column. You were looking for Dorothy Collins.
Right. She was a brand.
Yeah, she was.
But he said the one thing that he learned was that his mother always told skeptics, yes, you can grow roses.
She was a wonderful rose grower. Yes. So
I wish I
you
would have been
just
able to
do
see
the right
those.
things, and yes, I love it.
Yeah. This is one, Darla Roofer. My grandma used to throw her coffee grounds and crushed eggshells on the plants on either side of her door. Not sure if it was of value. Don, what do you think?
Definitely. Coffee grounds. My mom did the same thing, toss them out kind of in a little area out the back door. And yeah, coffee grounds, a good organic material, a little bit of fertilizer in it. The acid is gone. We've drunk that in the coffee already. So yeah, coffee grounds, good material.
And what about eggshells?
Yeah, eggshells also in the compost. They're not really going to help in the bottom of your tomato plant to give them more calcium because there's enough calcium in the soil. But eggshells, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Steph Hansen wrote, one thing that her mother taught her was stop growing sweet corn. Raccoons will always win. Well, that's if you live in an area you've got a lot of raccoons.
We're on the south edge of Fargo.
Yeah.
Raccoons find us.
Really?
Yeah, they do.
Well, you've got quite the.
They find us somehow, and we've got our garden fenced, but they can climb somehow, finagle. And the thing I find fascinating about raccoons, okay, you don't want to pick your sweet corn when it's not ripe, obviously.
Right.
And so oftentimes I'm thinking tomorrow's the day that sweet corn's going to be, and then it's that night that the raccoons move in. So yeah, I'm kind of with you there, Steph.
This is one from Leah Thorntveit Hyde. My mom told me her mother would often say planting sets in the rain brought good luck. Interesting. I've never heard that one.
Well, planting transplants in the rain. Yeah, I'm not sure about the good luck, but it's almost perfect conditions because they don't suffer transplant shock.
Right.
The worst time is a hot, windy, sunny day because things could wilt. Yeah, so getting out there on a rainy day, maybe not the most comfortable for you, but the plants like it.
Yeah. Laura Selewski. My mother Stella would say, always talk to your plants with love. Great advice.
That's great advice.
And it's sound advice.
Yeah, it is. Because people ask me, do you talk to your plants? And I say, well, if talking to them means that I'm trying to provide what they need, then I probably do. I see that there's another one here from Merle Selvog, who says, my mom wasn't the gardener. My dad was. And I think might have been a picture of his dad wearing, or their dad wearing a straw hat and plaid shirt. And he gave things the proper room to grow if needed, such as squash, pumpkins, cucumbers, gave them this room because they do. And he built his own trellises for beans, 2 large vegetable gardens. So yeah, sometimes it's the dad, grandpa.
You can learn from anybody.
We may have to do this on Father's Day.
Father's Day gardening.
Your dads and grandpas.
From Missy Doll Youngs, she said, my mother had the most beautiful flowers. She always mixed up where she bought her flowers. Even though they don't grow well in our yard, she could grow the most beautiful sweet peas. She taught me how to deadhead a flower, when to pick rhubarb, and how to share perennials with others.
Those are all great
things
tips. I knew Missy's mom.
Oh, did you?
And dad, yeah. Oh, wonderful gardeners. And yes, her mom had beautiful flowers. Good points. Good pointers.
Nola Storm wrote, I learned that gardening is therapy and moms prefer to have their kids pick off all the potato bugs.
Yeah, instead of doing it themselves.
Yeah.
In fact, my dad did the same thing. He grew a distaste for potato bugs because when he was young, that was his job in the potato patch, was to go through and pick off all those bugs. He didn't like the smell. They had to drop in a can of kerosene, and yeah, he didn't care for it. Nola, by the way, Nola Storm was one of the co-founders with Jack Wood of the Growing Together Community Gardens.
Really?
Yeah, so thanks, Nola, for chiming in.
That's great. We got one more here from Tim Mathern. While gardening, my mother taught me that it's important to teach children skills commensurate with their age and ability. And
sure.
Like you were saying earlier, too, your mom may have had you out in the garden at 5 so she could keep an eye on you, but she also helped give you things, little tasks to do that you could do, and then you could
Tim has a good point, so that when kids are at a certain stage, you give them what they can do. If, for example, if they can identify weeds, if they're of an age that they can tell the difference between a carrot and a weed, well, then we could have them weeding a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a quick little break. When we come back, a little bit more with memories and lessons learned from our mother in the garden.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, we're back and we're talking about in recognition of this Sunday, being Mother's Day. We're talking about lessons and memories that we have of our mothers and grandmothers in the garden. And Don, you had asked people on Facebook to if they had particular memories, and you got a bunch.
Lots of good feedback.
This has been really fun. Here's another one from Heather Ellen. She said she learned everything from her mother, but the first thing that comes to mind is put potatoes in on Good Friday for a good crop.
And I'm all for that as long as Good Friday falls somewhat late. If it's the earliest Good Friday, it might be a little chilly.
Right.
But yep, that's, if Good Friday lands in April, I think it'll work.
Yeah. This is from
a good history of it working, apparently, too.
Yeah,
from these.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes there's a reason why these things persist
because it has worked for people.
Vanessa Veflin said what she learned from her mom or grandmother was the joy of picking out seeds from the Gurney's catalogs to watching them work diligently in the garden, planting, weeding, and harvesting. I think they enjoyed seeing their grandkids experiencing fresh vegetables. Then from gardening to canning would begin. Both had a wall of shelves filled with goodies to last the following spring.
Oh, man,
That's
the
great.
wall of canned goods. You knew life was good. It was going to be good for the winter.
My
good
mom was
eating.
a big canner, so yeah, I can relate to that.
And I see Tim Flackle was another one that said, his mom said, always plant potatoes on Good Friday. There's another one. Warren Larson kind of seconds that. So a number of people on Good Friday.
Yeah. This is one that we always remind ourselves of. Sandra Kleisen Vigan. She says, have patience and enjoy the process and the beauty. Hard work is worth it in the end.
Patience pays off.
Yep. Jamie McDowell, take your Flintstone vitamins and plant a garden. I used to pick lima beans from the garden and eat them raw.
Oh, awesome. Even peas. Peas fresh out of the pod. You don't even have to cook them. They're wonderful.
And kind of along that lines, take your time, patience. You get what you give. Hard work equals huge rewards. This is from Donna Luvas Bai. Applies to more than just gardening, but food provides the fuel to take on anything.
Isn't that the truth?
Barb Battinger wrote, my mom had 8 kids. She went to garden and had the rest of us help dad or clean the house. She showed us how to put together purple ribbon winning vegetable gardens for our local county fair. We learned canning and food preservation as well.
And for large families, a garden was a must.
Yep.
Absolutely a must to keep everyone fed.
Christy Rose said, my mom said her thumbs bordered on black instead of green and refused to try. I've always been the white to her black. So she taught me that when there's a will, there's a way.
Absolutely. Yeah, if a person wants a green thumb and you try, I think you can accomplish.
Here's one from Ken Eris. He wrote, my mother taught me to take a 2-gallon paint pail and to make 16 penny nail holes in the bottom of the sides, then to place it in a hole deep enough to leave 1 inch around the ground level. Then tamp the soil around it and plant the cukes, squash, or tomatoes around it. Since we didn't have running water when I was young as a 9-year-old.
Sure, so that was a self-watering unit. Put the pail with holes down in, fill that with water, and then you'd have almost a self-watering unit.
On all the sides around it, yeah.
Awesome.
I said I could carry a 2-gallon pail of water to each buried pail and fill it. It got the water down deeper to get the plants to root deep and keep the surface dry and reduce weeding. I still do this each year to my vine vegetables. Just one of the many things she and my grandmother taught me.
Good advice.
Gail Copland wrote, I was very much loved and treated well on our farm in Norman County. I spent many formative years with my grandparents. We weren't much of gift giving. That didn't matter to me when I was about 8. Grandma put me on a red wagon. I was thrilled but a little puzzled, so he showed me how to use it. You got to the farmyard where the old well-rotted Manure was you filled the wagon and dragged it to grandma's garden and spaded it in, or if there was vegetables.
She learned early the use of manure, good composting, and how to produce natural fertilizer.
Yeah, she said it produced wonderful vegetables of all kinds, basically lived on what we canned or harvested or butchered. So a lesson I learned was that things like wagons were multi-purpose. Drag your friends, pets, and manure in it. Again, good memory, good lesson there. Beth Rognus wrote, my mother gardened until she was 85 years old and had her yard on the Surreptitious tour 3 times. The last being the year she was 85. Her joy and pride in what she accomplished still inspires me today.
Yeah, I knew Beth's mom. We were all in the Fargo Garden Society together. I knew Beth's mom, wonderful gardener.
Terry Leverson Clow said, back in the 70s, my mom Bev had a garden. I found it fun as a kid to weed between the rows, much to her delight. To this day, I'm a mother plucker and love to pull weeds.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating. It's kind of like eating popcorn.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just can't stop once you start weeding.
Sheila Capistran wrote, my mom showed us kids how to grow, harvest, process, even if it meant picking every green tomato and taking them in to ripen and process later and preserve the lot. She showed us how and when and where to forage for asparagus, ramps, berries, and the like. She showed us how to tell time, or at least how much daylight / work remained by holding our hands towards the horizon under the sun and counting how many fingers space there was. Each finger was worth 15 minutes.
I'll have to try that.
I'd never heard that one.
It's a good day. I learned something totally new to try. That's awesome. Thank you.
Let's see. Shirley Hansen said, my 4 children enjoyed eating all the vegetables. My husband told me that they enjoyed cooking for our kids when we visited because they liked everything. I so believe that allowing them to help gardening promotes this. Who is going to reject something that you have planted and nurtured?
Yep, kids who help grow in the garden do eat more vegetables. That's a known fact.
Janine Paulson wrote, my mom didn't can anything, but we processed lots of corn and beans for freezing, and she never stopped buying and planting trees. Well, that's a great thing.
Yeah, definitely.
The other thing I learned from her was about self-seeding annuals, which is possible by not being so fussy about cleaning up in the fall.
It's kind of fun to have some annuals that pop up. Your cosmos and different things will pop up by themselves in the spring.
Yep. Connie Duncan Birmingham said she learned to pick the potato bugs off the potato plants and drop them in a little can of kerosene.
Yes, before they decimate your potato plants, you can just hand pick them. They're a big fat beetle. I see Cindy Gunnarsson says the same thing as a child. She did that as well, helping her mom.
Yep. Mary Tintus wrote, Mom was a masterful gardener and her organic garden was bountiful and beautiful. She taught me to never plant too early.
Yeah, just like my mom.
Let the soil warm up for best germination, and that we are stewards of the earth, take care of it, and it gives back.
Wise words.
Yeah. Lynn Stig said, it's a good day when you can look out your window and see beautiful colors, no matter the flower or the weed.
That's true. Although I might question thistle flowers. They're pretty, but...
Yeah, you don't want to have to... That's a yard maybe you don't want to spend too much time in.
But great comments.
Tom Beth Iverson said, I was raised by my grandparents. Our garden was my classroom where many lessons took root under her always gentle but direct guidance. She taught me patience through the nurturing of each plant and generosity in sharing our harvest with others. I am more generous as a result, but the patience thing did not stick. Well, that's too bad. The bees, birds, and butterflies that visited our garden in Barnesville were the teachers of nature's delicate balance, something Beth and I appreciate even more today. Above all, she imparted the spirituality of gardening, showing me how tending the earth can soothe the soul and connect us to something greater than ourselves. So that's really nice to hear.
Oh, that is great. Yeah, and I know Tom and Beth Iverson, wonderful, beautiful yards, and they did learn patience. Here's one that I enjoy from Katie Cole. She says she learned 3 things: making hollyhock ladies with different parts of the flower and toothpicks.
Oh.
Yeah, hollyhocks have kind of an open type blossom. Yeah, and I could see you could maybe make kind of a little lady with that. That's awesome. And then Jack and the Beanstalk is more interesting when a kid plants castor beans.
Ooh,
yes, the castor beans grow prolifically. And then third, eating all the berries while picking them leaves none for the table.
True, but you've enjoyed them.
You have. At least if you're the one picking.
Yeah.
Is awesome.
I got a couple more here. Robert Elijah wrote, my mom is 89 and talking about her annual trip, 35 or 36 years, to Lou's Greenhouse in Big Stone, SD, South Dakota, I suppose.
Sure.
Big Stone, South Dakota. She raised a large garden for years to feed the family. My job was to weed and water. Now she is imparting her well of hands-on knowledge to her grandkids. That's great.
Oh, that's awesome. Yes, and when she mentions taking the annual trip to the greenhouse,
Yep.
Many of us do multiple trips, but oftentimes there's that one main annual trip that you make.
Yep.
And that's awesome, especially to your local owned garden center that's right there.
I believe that'll happen a lot this weekend for Mother's Day, won't it?
I think you are right.
A couple more here. Sheila Witchman wrote, my mom taught me to try new things like dandelion greens, kale, mustard greens, collards, etc. 60 years ago when most people didn't even know what they were in North Dakota.
Well, that's true. Yeah, collards. I don't know if I've ever eaten collards.
I have in the South.
And
not
of
up
course,
here.
kale is just the last decades or so that
Really
kale has
gotten
become
on
popular.
very popular.
Those things. My gosh, in our garden growing up at home, we had no kale, no mustard greens, no collards. Dandelion greens. Well, my mom made dandelion wine out of the blossoms.
There you
so
go.
we used the dandelions.
One last one. This is from Pam Matchy Thede. I will never forget working in the garden with Mom's cousin and uncovering the orange of a carrot beneath the black of the soil. That was 60 years ago, and it is real to me now as it was then. Priceless.
Oh, boy. And that is one of life's simple pleasures, pulling a carrot right out of the ground, brushing the soil off, most of it anyway, and nibbling on it. There's not a carrot as sweet as that.
And that's just these great memories. Isn't this fantastic that all these people wrote in, they're able to share these great memories that they have of what gardening has meant to their families, the wisdom that was passed down from their moms and grandmas, those family experiences.
Yeah, isn't that awesome? And the thing that I also find awesome is that has not stopped. That isn't something that that's in the past. This is ongoing.
Yep.
Yeah, just think of the moms and grandmas and dads and grandpas that are gardening now. They got kids, grandkids gardening with them. So maybe in, 50 years, is somebody going to be doing a podcast and inviting the current ones to talk about it? You see what I mean?
Yep.
So this isn't like we aren't talking about something only in the past. For some of us, we're reminiscing, but this is an ongoing thing, this memory making.
Yep.
Gardening goes on.
Yes, exactly. It's just a big wheel, and it's always every time around. The new cycle.
Thank you, everybody that commented on this. You've been part of a great program.
Yeah.
And best wishes to all the moms and grandmas.
Well, so Don, if people have questions about their garden, or if they have memories of their growing up and their family memories of gardening, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, send me an email, donald.kinsler, spelled KINZLER, at ndsu.edu.
And if you have pictures of your mom in your garden, send them along to Don,
that's awesome.
too.
Yes, among these comments, we had a photo or two sent in.
I think that we'll post those to our Instagram account when we post this video, when we post this podcast.
And thank you, everyone, for listening, and have a good gardening spring. We'll see you next week.
Happy Mother's Day.